All right. Hello and welcome once again to White Lotus of Light conversational series. And I am thrilled and honored to have Dr. Kathleen Ball today. And she has a extremely interesting background, which we're going to get into a lot of that. But she is probably most famous for her revelatory book, A Grail Quest, Discovering a Mysterious Knights Templar Cave in Brazil, which is going to be the focus for today, and her documentary film, which I believe is on Gaia TV, The Brazilian Templar Mysteries. And so that's about unveiling a tale of divine synchronicity and adventurous exploration. Dr. Ball's work pioneers new perspectives on the history of the enigmatic Knights Templar. And in her intriguing quest, a grail quest, I guess, Dr. Ball discovered a 700-year-old hand-carved cave tucked away on the outskirts of Alto Paraíso, a remote Brazilian town. What?
Alto Paraíso.
Oh, well, we won't bother the viewers with the 700 takes it would require for me to pronounce that correctly, but I yield to your far superior pronunciation. So historical evidence suggests that this cave was crafted by the Knights Templar, shedding new light on their previously unknown travels to South America, predating the era of Columbus. This groundbreaking discovery has sparked a surge of interest among the academic community and the general public, unlocking a new and mysterious chapter in Templar research encompassing Brazil's rich history. A Grail Quest recounts the journey behind this discovery and delves into the significance of the Templars' presence in Brazil. The book is teeming with innovative findings, contributing to our understanding of this mysterious order of knights. It is available on Amazon and invites readers worldwide to join the thrill of exploration and discovery. And accompanying this book is her Gaia TV documentary, The Brazilian Templars Mystery, which is on both Gaia and Amazon Prime. The film is an engaging visual journey into the heart of Dr. Ball's work and findings, providing viewers with a deeper understanding of the Templars' agenda. With the discovery of the Templar cave in Brazil, we may be on the brink of a historical paradigm shift, Dr. Ball asserts, and I would agree. Her work has already inspired a wave of scholars who have joined her research efforts, raising the question, has this discovery provided evidence that will rewrite our history? And Dr. Ball's unique background as a Templar researcher, educator, artist, and explorer offers her an unmatched lens into the world of the Knights Templar. Her multifaceted career spans 4 decades and is dedicated to exploring ancient sites, indigenous art, temples, and ancient civilizations. So, yeah, wow, super exciting. So I am actually part of a Templar order, the Templar Collegia, and our Grand Master Timothy Hogan has told me, and has also revealed in this channel, the fact that the Templar were, went throughout the Americas and down through Central America. But to my knowledge, your discovery in Brazil is quite unique. And I'm wondering if you could tell the viewers, can you give us a bit on your background and how you got into Templar research?
Well, I was studying Leonardo da Vinci, and then that led me into secret societies of Collège des Sciences, some of the earlier secret societies. And that, of course, eventually led me to the Templars. And I started researching them in the late 1990s, around 97 or so, 96, 97. And just, there really wasn't much available at that time. So I was just, getting whatever I could get. And in 2006, I happened to have been in Italy when the Da Vinci Code came out as a film. I had read the book, and the Catholic Church at the time was having a fit about it. Actually, they sued Dan Brown, and there was a whole bunch of controversy. But I happened to have been there for that, and there was it generated a lot of conversation and dialogue about the Templars, and all of a sudden, it was like things were just coming out of the woodwork. Information, books, family records, just a lot of information, a lot of research. So I was getting my hands on whatever I could get my hands on, and I was fascinated with the Templars. And, you know, and I had no idea, but later, after my grandfather passed away, I got the family records, and it turned out that my great grandfather was a Templar. Yeah. So lo and behold, you know, here I was actually, it was in my own DNA, you know. So that happened, and so that was 2006. 2007, not much happened. Not much happened. 2008, 2009, I made a trip to France. My husband and I reunited in 2008. We had been high school sweethearts, and we got back together in 2008. We got married in 2009, and we went to France in 2009. And we ended up canceling all our plans and just kind of winging it, you know. So here we are in Senac in the Loire Valley in France, and we decided to go up to Dome, which is in, right, I think you're familiar. And we were looking, we were just going to grottos and looking at petroglyph sites. I've been involved in archaeology sites since the early 1990s, and that fascinated me. And I document, and I, you know, was drawing, well, whatnot. So anyway, so the one in Dome, I wasn't particularly impressed with, but we're walking out, and we go to sit down at this table, and the curator from the museum comes out and starts talking to me. And next thing I know, he's handed me the keys to the dungeon in Dome, there in Dome, France, and says, I'll show you, I'll take you over there. He says, take as much time as you like, and just bring me the keys when you're done.
And so like, just to interject, Kathleen, that is where some of the Knights Templar were held in that dungeon, yes, when the order was suppressed in the early 1300s. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Jacques de Molay himself there, Grandmaster Jacques de Molay? Right.
So here we are, right? Jacques de Molay, and, you know, several of 100 of the Templars were housed here, there, and also in Chinon, France. But anyway, here I am. I'm in Dome, and I've got these keys, and I, you know, unlock this dungeon and go in, and I start. I had a near-death experience in 1990, March 10th. Ever since I had that near-death experience, I've been extremely sensitive to energy in spaces, at sites, just very, very sensitive. So I walk in, and I'm immediately pick up on some really interesting energy, a combination of despair and peace. It was very, very interesting energy. Anyway, and I start studying the, you know, the glyphs that are inside this dungeon, and something compelled me. I photographed every single one of them. I just photographed everything I could, and we were in there for about an hour. And we went back out. I went to give the keys back to this man, and he says to me, you know what the Templars were protecting? And I said, well, I have heard some speculation. What's your take? You know, and so he tells me that, you know, they were protecting the bloodline of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and that, you know, that they were an order that was disbanded, but they never were fully disbanded. They went underground. And that, you know, that they would basically resurface. So we had this short conversation, and he said, you know, you might want to go check into Marseille. You know, that's where Mary Magdalene came with Lazarus and Martha into Marseille after the crucifixion, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to. You know, it sounds great. So my husband and I decided to take a road trip down there, and we get into Marseille. And there's a cathedral there dedicated to Mary Magdalene and another saint. And I go to open the door, and this nun comes out, and she grabs me and hugs me and tells me that she's been waiting for me since college. She learned English in college so that when I came, she could speak with me and give me directions.
Did she elaborate on that at all? Did she elaborate?
And she's weeping, right? And I'm just like, okay. In my head, well, since the near-death experience, a lot of these things have happened to me. I've had some very strange experiences. But for my husband, this was his first experience with this stuff. So my husband's just like blown away. He's not sure what to think about this whole thing. And this nun rushes me. She hurries me off into her little studio, and she draws me this map, and she sends me up to St. Bowman, which is where Mary Magdalene resided for, there's some discrepancy, 12 to 17 years in intercessory prayer after she was done evangelizing and raising her children. Okay, so we try to get up to St. Bowman, can't find it. We just couldn't find this particular place. So we go on with our trip. I wake up in the middle of the night about 4 days later, and I'm compelled to go back and look for St. Bowman. And I draw this little cabin, this little hut in my sketchbook, and not knowing what that was going to mean. And so the following morning, I woke my husband up. I said, look, we got to go back. He says, well, we're all the way down in, we're in Nice. That's a long ways back. And he wanted to go up through the Alps and do some things. But anyway, so he agreed finally. He said, okay. So we did it. And we got up to St. Bowman, drove right to it that time. And I'm a believer in divine intervention. I'm a believer in divine timing. So we get there, and it was just like this path was just laying there before us. And we get up there, we stay in the convent. The priests there were just amazingly helpful and just open arms. They fed us, they put us up for the night. The next morning, they showed us all the relics that the kings of France had brought to St. Bowman. It was a pilgrimage as soon as after the coronation of these kings that were supposedly descendants of Mary Magdalene, they made pilgrimages there to bless the fertility of their marriage. So they showed me all these relics and all the different gifts and things that the kings of France had brought them, and gave me the directions of how to get up to this little chapel where Mary Magdalene stayed. So we're heading up there, and I'm just like in an altered dimension. I mean, I felt as if I was in an altered dimension. I've got birds coming up to me and butterflies landing on me. I just felt like nature was embracing me. And we get up to the chapel, and I immediately sat in one of the pews and went into meditation, just instantly. And I don't know exactly what happened. I have no idea. I believe to this day that I was a conduit. There was a clearing of a lot of negative, dark energy, just really negative forms that were spiraling up and out through the top of this space. And that went on for about an hour and 45 minutes while my husband sat next to me. And the next thing I knew was a lot of light pouring in, angelic presence. It felt like angelic presence. And then I opened my eyes, and there was 4 priests and a bishop that had come in while I was in this trance state. And one of the priests looked at me and just beaming, he's just smiling. And they invited us up to participate in Eucharist. And so I was like, okay, well, I was baptized, so I'm a Christian. I can do this. My husband as well. So we participate. We take the cracker and the juice, and we go up to the bishop. The bishop grabs the cracker out of my mouth and starts swearing at me in French. I don't know what got into him. But anyway, the priests grab him both 2 by 2 on either side and haul him out of space. And one of the priests comes back in and apologizes to me and tells me, I'm so sorry, madame, we don't know what happened, but we are thankful for what you did. And you can take as much time in the space as you like. We are very thankful for you coming and doing what you did. And how he knew, I have no idea. But anyway, so that.
Oh, it looks like you've frozen up, Kathleen. Kathleen, are you still there?
Pardon?
Oh, I think it froze up, Kathleen. Can you say again? So you had said, and I wasn't clear on what it was. You had just said that the priests thanked you for what you had done. What was it that they thought that you had done?
Well, he wasn't sure, but he was just smiling and thanking me profusely. Merci beaucoup, madame. Thank you so much for what you have done here. Clearing this energy and on, and he just kept talking and going on and on. And so I assume, know, from what I saw in the visual that I was getting while I was in that meditation, I assumed that there was a clearing of maybe a lot of negative energy in that space that had accumulated over the years. That's all I know. I don't really know. These kind of things have happened to me. I don't always know exactly what I'm doing. I just know I'm supposed to just open up to the energy and let it happen, you know, so I do. But anyway, so that happened. And then, you know, I'm just doing research. I'm teaching. I know as art professor at Columbia in Sonora. And so I'm in the art department, and I'm just going and traveling to Egypt and all over the world, India, all over the place, between then and 2015, and just researching ancient sites, just what I do, documenting and photographing. I was in Egypt during the revolution, and I photographed all that, and you know, just a lot of different things. So 2015, I have a liver disease, mind you. Through this whole thing, I had a liver disease that was ongoing. And 2015, by 2015, I had had 29 cancer tumors in my liver. And I had had radiation. I had gone through an ayahuasca ceremony I did get rid of 7 of them during that. I had a lot of, you know, alternative medicines and stuff like that. So 2015, my girlfriend says, hey, I'm going to be 3 days before we can go. So, okay, cool. So she says, well, there's these wonderful waterfalls up in the Chapada, which is a national forestry area protected reserve. And it's about 3.5 hours outside of Brasilia. So we go up there, the car breaks down. We can't go to the place that we had intended because the car breaks down twice. Which again is divine timing. So we ended up not going to our hotel. We ended up having to cancel those reservations and stay in Alto Paraíso. Alto Paraíso means high paradise. And we had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, we really had no idea. So we get a hotel. Wonderful. A couple days later, we're invited to go on a trek down to this amazing waterfall at Agua Fria, which means cold water in Portuguese. The Brazilians speak Brazilian Portuguese. It's a Portuguese language. So anyway, so we go down into this waterfall. We come back up, and the owner of the camping Pousada, which is the hotel, camping hotel, that is on this land where this waterfall is. He invites us to lunch, and he says, hey, would you girls like to go and see next door on the property adjoining this? There is a crystal. There's crystals all over the property, and there's a crystal vein that goes through the property that's about 1 meter high by about, a meter, about 2 kilometers long. And we said, yeah, of course, so we set out on this trek. We head over there. We meet with this young man, and he takes us over, and we there's thousands of crystals, thousands. They were everywhere. And he takes us down to the crystal vein. It's extremely hot. This is in August in Brazil, and it's just really hot. So he says, hey, let's go cool off. We'd already hiked about 3.5 kilometers at that point, and we were pretty tired. And this is straight down a hill, straight down the side of a mountain. And so he says, well, there's a little cave over here, and it's about another kilometer or so. We can rest and get our bearings and before we head back up. Okay, great. We get to the cave, and the man lifts up the bushes, and my mouth just dropped, and I'm like, oh my God, what is a Knights Templar cross doing out here in the middle of the wilderness in Brazil? That's what came out of my mouth. I was shocked. But not only was it a Knights Templar cross, it was the same kind of crosses I had seen in Dome, France. If I hadn't been in Dome, France, I would not have recognized the hand tool marks. Also in the cave was hand dug. And I'm just dumbfounded by this whole experience. I'm like, what is this doing out in the middle of nowhere, right? Well, Fast forward, I go back in 2017, 2018. I actually recorded the rediscovery of the cave. There was a huge fire that wiped out all the terrain in 2017, so I wasn't able to access it. 2018, I go back in. I filmed the rediscovery. 2019, I go back in again to do some more filming because it was filled with bats and spiders in 2018. And I finally get access, and I find all these amazing symbols and more crosses, but they're not just normal crosses. These are crosses that are the same that I've seen in Istanbul during the beginning of the formation of the Templars, long before 1099. And Timothy Hogan talks about this. Okay, and then I'm seeing that, and I'm seeing this particular cross that I'm being told is a Lemurian cross. And so now I'm really intrigued in what's going on in this cave and what's happening in this cave. And then on top of everything else, I find out that the cave was actually a gold mine. So now it starts to make sense why the Templars trekked all the way through the Amazon jungle into central Brazil and dug out this cave. There was gold in it. And they were mining gold, and they were taking it back to King Dinas, is what I believe, to replenish the coffers after the Holy Wars, right? In the Holy Land, all the kings were broke. They were broke. They didn't have any money during this time. And so here we have, here we've got a gold mine, and there's rumored to be 3 more caves, which I have not found yet, but I assume that they're probably the same. So here we find this cave. I find out it's gold mine. I find these symbols. I'm cross-referencing them with everybody I know, and I'm finding these same symbols in Istanbul, and then guess where else? I find them in Peniche, Portugal, on the coast of Portugal. And I also find out that King Dinas acquisitioned funds to build a fortress there, a naval fortress there, for the Templars in 1312. Okay. So that's my next trip into Portugal in September, October of this year. I'm heading back to Peniche. I'm going into Peniche to speak with some researchers there. There's some family records that I'm going to be looking at. And there's also a belief, and there's some indication in this paperwork, that the Templars actually used the migration route of the crows to take them from Peniche, Portugal, into Bahia, which is on the coast of Brazil. That they actually followed that migration path, which was fascinating to me. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And I don't know if that's a fact yet. I'm still researching that. But it certainly is interesting to me. And and so I'm going to be going into Peniche, and I'm going to be interviewing, talking with these fellow researchers there, and examining these family records and some of this other information. But when I was back in Brazil in 2021, I was actually asked by the Amazonian tribes if I wanted to interview them about how the Templars got from Bahia into Alto Paraíso area. Well, COVID, right? We had COVID. So none of the tribes come in, but one of the tribes invites me into the Amazon jungle. So I'm like, okay, I'm going into the Amazon jungle. And I put a crew together, a photographer, which I had brought with me, and a translator, a guide that was actually a member of one of the cousin tribes of this one tribe. And we go into Pinuya, which is a tribe in outside of Rio Branco, down in the Amazon jungle. We fly into Rio Branco, and this 12-hour trek down into the village of Pinuya, and I spent a week and a half with the Huni Queen people and interviewing them. And they didn't have any direct information because they don't keep written records. but there had been rumors. They had obviously heard about, you know, tall white men, blonde men, bearded men that had come in through the Amazon jungle who had actually been escorted into central Brazil. So that was a great, you know, that was a great little bit of information. And then also I interviewed the Kalunga people, which they came in the 1500s. They were the runaway slaves that had come in from Africa, and they actually ran away before they even, you know, right as they were getting off the ship, they just took off. And they happened to have settled in Alto Paraíso. Well, guess where they lived? While they, for protection, they were living in these caves.
Oh, wow.
So these caves, so that helped me establish some dating. The caves were there prior to the Kalunga's arrival in the 1500s. So, and they also told me that they took everything that wasn't nailed down because they were in survival mode, and they reused all the metal, everything that they found. So this was why I wasn't able to find any artifacts in the area. I took a metal detector all through the cave and the surrounding area, and I wasn't able to find anything, and I was really kind of stumped by that. I should have been able to find, you know, something, chainmail, something, some sort of metal. But that explained it to me. They you know, they sweeped it. They took everything that they could because they were desperate, you know, whatever they could trade for food, you know, so they could reestablish themselves. But anyway, so here, that's where I'm at to date. And I also found some research in the Rosicrucian Library indicating that possibly, well, I know for a fact that Zerubbabel organized a band of knights in when during the building of the second temple. And the reason he organized these knights was to protect the building.
Who did?
Zerubbabel.
I'm not familiar with that name.
Yeah. So we're talking the second building of the temple, the second building. Okay. But there was a lot of political propaganda against this happening. So he organized an order of knights to protect the builders of this temple, right? And I'm trying to get the actual, if I can find some records of names, but I'm now suspecting that through Mason marks in Peniche and in Portugal, I may find some connections between that order and the Templars. Because when the Templars were organized in the early 1000s, they went right straight to the Temple Mount. They didn't pass go, they didn't, you know, detour, they went right straight there. And they, what did they do? They excavated below the Temple Mount. Okay, where did they get this information? I think it was passed down generationally, from generation to generation through these families. Many of the early Templars were Jewish, right? They were Jewish. And so, and these people kept word of mouth records. These families kept word of mouth records. So if there's anything written down, I'm hoping that, you know, I'm gonna find this information in Portugal. But I believe, so this is what my premise is that there's been an ongoing stream of information, wisdom, esoteric beliefs that have been brought down, and practices that have been brought down into our present day by Templars and previous knights, previous organizations that probably stem all the way back to Lemuria. You know, I've talked to several other researchers about this that agree with me on this, that today, for whatever reason in this time frame that we're living in today, the Templars have reorganized for the first time in 700 years. I was there for that celebration in Tomar, Portugal. I filmed the whole thing. So I was there for that commemoration when they all came together and signed their agreement that they all were going to be one order again. So I'm well aware of, you know, what's going on. So anyway, so what I believe is that there is a cache of esoteric knowledge, wisdom. I don't believe that the Templars, you know, everybody's been looking for the Templars' lost treasure, right? And I believe, yeah, sure, there's probably gold, there's probably whatever there is, you know, but I think that a lot of it is probably generational records, esoteric practices, right? I just, I feel this in my gut, you know, this is the track that I'm on. And there's a lot of Templars that think that I'm going to find this treasure. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that they sure keep track on what I'm doing. And, you know, I've been told by numerous people, and I've also been told by a couple of Templars that they think that this is my destiny to uncover this information for whatever reason. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm just the worker bee. That's how I feel. You know, I'm just the worker bee that's going out and doing what needs to be done. So anyway, to date, this is what's going on. This is the backstory to the film. I don't know if you saw the film, but this is the backstory.
No, I haven't had a chance to see that yet, unfortunately. And also, I have, much to my rage, the people who work on the yard are outside mowing, and so I have to keep, in fact, you can hear them now, muting it. Real quick, just before they come back close to the speaker, could you tell me more? I was very intrigued by what you said about the nun. Did she elaborate on that prophecy?
About which prophecy? I'm sorry.
Sorry, that lawnmower is right outside the window. The nun in France.
Oh, the nun. Yes. Yeah, I really don't know much about this woman. I don't. In fact, when I go back to Europe, I've been compelled to go back and try to connect with her again. I was so taken back with the experience at the time that I really didn't get much background information on her. So I want to go back. I have photographs of her though, and I together, and so I saved those. But she was convinced that she even learned English in college, so that when I came, which had to have been at least 20 to 30 years later, because she was in her late 50s, maybe, you know, when I connected with her. But she knew I was coming, you know, she knew I was coming. So, you know, these kind of experiences have convinced me, and I've had numerous, I could tell you a whole bunch of different experiences that have happened, that there is something going on. I'm keyed into the Templars on a very fundamental level, an esoteric energy that I'm just keyed into them. And I had the same kind of experience with Leonardo da Vinci too, when I went into Amboise in the Loire, you know, to where he lived before he died. I had numerous spiritual experiences there as a result of that. I had tuned into him. But anyway, so I would love to know more about her. I wanted to find out what order she's, you know, belongs to, and just sit down and have a conversation with her about that. And like I said, at the time, it was just they were getting ready to close. You know, she said, "You must promise me." She looked at me and she said, "You must promise me, Madame. Promise me that you will go and you will do what you're directed to do." Okay. She couldn't even tell me what it was that was going to unfold. She just told me that I needed a promise to do it. And I did. You know.
That's awesome. So I was listening to one of your interviews, and I had a thought. So I have a question for you that's fairly, I mean, it could be complicated, your answer, but probably fairly short. And then I have a follow-up to that. And do you believe in reincarnation?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just listening to your interview and some of the things you were saying, I was like, and I didn't know you had a relative who was a Knights Templar, which to me makes it even more likely, because I too believe, or even for me, you know, it's up to everyone to determine it for themselves. But for me, I'm certain reincarnation exists, and reincarnation seems to happen very often in bloodlines. You can incarnate out of that, but very often there's things related to bloodlines that you incarnate again and again. And so do you think it's possible that you were a Knights Templar yourself previously, and perhaps even among the members who were in Brazil, and that's how you intuitively found the cave, especially
very possibly. Yeah, and yes, very possibly. And when I found out that there were actually orders that were women.
Hmm.
There's one in Spain, and then there was another one. I did some pretty good research on it and found out that there were actually women Templars during that time frame. And I feel very strongly that I may have been either a Templar or somehow in the inner circle, because I have a great deal of esoteric wisdom and knowledge this lifetime. I was born with it. My father said that I was asking questions from the age of 3 years old, and I was already asking questions. And he said, "You came in with an agenda," you know.
So
It was
I'm getting
oh,
chills with what I'm feeling. I want to ask you: have you ever heard of the practice, the sacred, the ancient practice, and it was practiced quite a bit in pre-dynastic Europe, known as it's an occult practice known as esoteric, known as perfecting the solar body. Oh, you have some microphone feedback. That's really. Are you hitting a microphone or something?
no. Oh, maybe I was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I was touching this side of the computer, so maybe yeah.
Oh yeah. So uh have you ever heard of the it's a Western occult mystery school practice that apparently comes from pre-dynastic Egypt, known as perfecting the solar body? Have you ever heard of that?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
have. And
So
I'm a firm believer of that because I have distinct past life. I remember several lifetimes in Egypt, and I also remember being a priestess and practicing some things that I actually do now. This
so
clearing stuff I did then. It
so
wasn't, yeah. So,
go ahead.
yeah, so, this isn't anything new to me. I'm my higher self, my soul. This is not new. These things aren't new to me. I was woke up when I had the near death experience. I had a Sufi master come to me, the second of two in my life that have come to me. One when I was 18, and the second one came when I was 33, right before I had this near death experience. And all he did was sit down in a restaurant and ask me, "Kathleen, how did he know my name? What are you doing?" And I rattled off a bunch of baloney because I was, off on a not so good track. Anyway, and I rattled off a bunch of baloney, and he looked right dead at me like he was looking into my soul, and he said, "No, you know what I mean." And I somehow knew what he meant, and it made me want to cry. And he got up, he paid for his coffee that he never drank, and he walked out the front door, and then from me and three other waitresses disappeared into thin air. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but it happened.
Where
And
were you when this happened?
this was in Jackson. This was in the Amador County Gold Country, which is where one of my homes is.
Huh.
And
Wow.
it was after my first husband was murdered, and I moved up there with my children. And yeah, a long story, but anyway, I've had a very, very interesting life. It's all in the book. But anyway, I moved up there to get my children out of the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was a single mom, and I wanted a safe place for them to grow up. And so I moved up there, and I just got a quick job at a restaurant so I could get back into college and do what I needed to do. And this happened. This experience happened. And so shortly after that, I had my near death experience. And
Mm.
after I had the near death experience, I just had this hunger for esoteric knowledge, wisdom. I read the Bible like 200 times, backwards and forwards. I dove into the Old Testament. I saw what it says. If you have eyes to see and ears to hear, it will be open to you. And there was all sorts of stuff in there. All sorts of stuff in the Revelation, chapter Revelations, and several other chapters. Anyway, so that started it. That started my, actually my research for my PhD. It's basically what happened. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time. I started studying quantum physics, biology, nuclear physics, um, you name it. I mean, I was studying it. And I was just hungry for all this knowledge. And esoteric, I studied the Vedas, I studied esoteric, the basis and then the origin of African belief systems, Native American belief systems. I started going out on archaeological digs as I was an artist, so I was drawing for these archaeological digs. And I would have these spiritual experiences at these places, these revelations that would come to me, and I would tell people, you're going to find this there, and they would dig it up, and sure enough, there would be something there. So this stuff just started happening, and I call it, I was waking up to my abilities that were innate, that I was born with. But for whatever reason, I had to go through this time frame from the age of 11 to 22, and then from 22 to 33, which are major numbers if you know anything about esoteric belief systems, right?
Right.
And I just, I just had these significant experiences. At 22, I was dating a guy who was a bodyguard for Waylon Jennings, and I ended up on the road with Willie Nelson and Waylon and everybody. And wow. At 22 years old, Willie actually sat down with me. We had this conversation and said, hey, what are you doing with your life? You've got a lot of potential. What are you doing with your life? This is in my book also. And so here we are again at a significant age of 22. He sits me down, and it was my 22nd birthday too, by the way. And he paid for everything for me for my 22nd birthday. And that was another shift for me in my life. It was a major shift. I got back from that trip. I left that person that I was dating. I totally moved into a different direction at that point. And then again at 33, right? 33, I had my near-death experience at 33. So to answer your question, absolutely.
So I have a short question. What's your sign? Are you a Gemini?
What I'm saying, what?
What's your sign?
Oh, I'm an Aries.
Oh, you're an Aries like me. Oh, okay. Well then, hey, I get it.
Yeah, we're March 28th. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, I'm March 31st. Very close. Very close. Okay, so the solar body, right? What I was going to ask is, I have a theory on why there was the prophecy. Do you know about the prophecy of the Cathar, that in 777 years from the Cathar being wiped out, that the branch would grow green buds again and stuff? Yeah. What I think that might be is, I talk a lot in my channel about, I don't know, these various these different spiritual forces that have been warring with each other through the ages, and I talk about the yugas a lot and how we're at the tail end of the very tail end of the Kali Yuga, and that the group that a lot of people call Satanists, I call them Molochians because I believe they worship Moloch, and specifically, and that that group, it seems, discovered that if you torture to death your opponents, right? Like you burn them at the stake or you drown them, right? Which were the two things that the Inquisition did constantly to kill people. Like they tortured them to death, period. You can disrupt the solar body until enough lifetimes go by that coherence can come back together again. It can't disrupt it completely, but it can cause a break for quite a few incarnations before memory can return. And I think they knew that, meaning the Cathars knew that, and that's why that prophecy, and that's why so many people right now are going pop, pop, pop. And I have had very similar experiences to what you've had. I had a near-death experience, sort of. I broke my back in a car wreck when I was 19, and things changed quite a lot for me after that. But in particular, I very recently started to have all kinds of very complicated understanding that's really impossible for me to know, but I just know it. I just know it. And so I became convinced that I perfected my solar body in ancient Egypt and pre-dynastic Egypt, or very early Old Kingdom Egypt. I don't want to say publicly, but there's a fairly famous Egyptian figure that a mystic told me that I was the reincarnation of, and it immediately clicked for me because they're interested in astrology, healing, all these different kind of things, just like I am. And so I believe that I can't remember any of my Templar lives, other than this one, but I'm almost positive I was a Templar myself. It seems that my family line was very likely Templar because my great-grandfather was, I'm not a Mason myself, but I am a Templar, but my great-grandfather was a 32nd degree Freemason. And back in those days, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that really meant something.
Yes.
And he had told my grandfather that he wanted to relate these important family secrets to him. And I said, wow, Grandpa, did you go? And he was like, no, I hated that bastard. So I let him die. And I was like, what? I was like, don't go for you or him, Grandpa, go for me. Like, I want to know. And so I strongly suspect now that I'm from a Templar bloodline myself because of how far back in my lineage there's the Masonic line. And of course, the Masons aren't the Templar, but the Masons are the repository of that Templar knowledge, and it's one of the places where they hid all that sacred knowledge. And so I'm pretty sure that I was a Templar and probably burned at the stake. And if that's the case, then that would then imply that I must have been sort of higher up in the order, like in the inner order, because those were the ones who stayed behind to make sure others could escape. So go ahead.
Right. Yeah, and what happened too, I don't know if you're familiar with Freddie Silva's work, but what happened too was France was like, they were like the out front where everybody knew that they had a stronghold in France, but they didn't know what was going on in Portugal. Mm-hmm. And so many of the Templars escaped to Portugal. Of course, yes, they went into La Rochelle, and yes, they went into Scotland. Yes, that did happen. But they also made a stay into Portugal and into Tomar, and they had control over almost the entire country. The king at the time, King Dennis, he was affiliated with the Templars, and he supported the Templars, and he kept the church at bay. It was the only country in Europe at the time that accepted the Cathars, that took in the Druids, took in even the Moors, even Islam, and welcomed them in and gave them land. They wanted it known that they were in control of the land, but they opened it up to the Jews, to the Cathars, to all of these people, right? And so here we had a sovereign nation, right? We have the sovereign nation of all these people, independent religious belief systems, and all this stuff going on in Portugal. And and the Inquisition was bound and determined. They wanted to take over that country and tear it apart. And King Dennis kept that from happening. And I think the way that he did was the Templars themselves were supplying him with money and funds to be able to defend his position and do whatever he needed to do, buy off whoever he had to buy off, et cetera, in order to keep what later became the Knights of Christ in place, right? Mm-hmm. So guess what happens in Alto Paraiso? So I show up in Alto Paraiso, and guess what one of the things that strikes me, the first thing that strikes me about Alto Paraiso, it is the only area in Brazil and in probably South America that has multi-cultures, multi-religions, and people from all walks of life.
Very Templar, very Templar. They've done that since
I literally I literally get chills when I talk about this because it excites me to no end. Here we are, 700 whatever it is years later, and the rebirth of the Templars. By the way, my film inspired the reorganization of the Templars in Brazil. Many of the orders in Brazil. Wow. So just so you know, yeah, they told me this. So. So here we have Alto Paraiso with all these people from India. I mean, I'm talking to people from Germany and India and France and all this. And what are they doing? They're forming collective communities all over. And when I went to one of these, guess what? I swear to God, it felt like I was walking into Lemuria.
Wow. That's interesting on a whole lot of levels. One of the things I do, Kathleen, is I'm an angelic magician, and I started out doing like Solomonic magic, and then one day I was communicating with Archangel Raziel, and I said, gosh, I feel guilty ordering all these beings of light around. And he said, oh, don't feel guilty. That's exactly what the 72 Shem angels were designed to do, were to answer prayers, or the more sophisticated, refined form of prayer, which is ritual magic. And so that's what they're meant to do. And I said, well, I guess what I feel like is what can I do to serve the celestial current? What can I do to serve the Most High? And he said, now you're asking the right question. And he gave me the keys to summon the principalities. And I have since worked my way up through the choirs of angels all the way up to the seraphim. And it took me over a year to do that, and of just like extreme dedication. And I had to do all sorts of internal work and so forth. But they've recently told me, and I'm starting to have a lot of synchronicities, including what you just said about this. They recently told me that what they want me to do, and not like I'm doing it myself or I'll be the CEO or something, but I would be part of this movement. But they want me to create these what are called golden age enclaves around the planet. And of course, Atlantis is the most recent golden age, but Lemuria is the golden age of the cycle prior, like 52,000 years before.
Then this is a crucial point, because what happened in Atlantis is what's happening now. Where we have all this corporate, you know what's going on right now, the spiritual warfare. I don't probably need to say anything to you about that. But this is exactly why Atlantis fell, is because they fell into, the original Atlanteans were Lemurians, right? Obviously, it was the evolutionary, that was the next evolutionary stage in human development, in our evolutionary path, right? We went from the very telepathic, very ethereal beings in Lemuria into the more mental state of the Atlanteans, where we had the technology come in, right? And also with that came, you know, the control issues and all that greed and blah, 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 blah. And power corrupts. Some power corrupts, absolutely, right? And we know how that works. We're living it right now. Yeah. So what ended up happening is that Atlantis at the end was actually at odds with Lemurian energy itself. So we've got the two polar energies, and we're right back, fast forward, here we are doing it again.
Yeah. Kathleen, do you mind if we take a real quick break? Because I actually really want to go down this exact path we're going. Do you mind if we take a short break here?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm just going to hit pause and I'll edit that.